Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you guys are doing very well today. So today's video I'm really excited to do because I am going to be sharing with you my top favorite palettes from the year of 2024. And I have to say, I had a really hard time narrowing it down to only 10 palettes. So I actually have 12 palettes to share with you today. I really hope that you don't mind. I just felt like I could do maybe 2 honorable mentions, if you will, and so that's kind of going to be what we do today. So let's go ahead and get started. I will be sure to link every palette that I'm talking about down below. Some of the links may be affiliated links, which means if you shop through the links, I do receive a small commission. And if you choose to do that, I thank you so much for supporting me and my channel. But everything will be linked down below for you all. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm very excited to talk about these amazing palettes that I played around with this year. And for the most part, I believe all of these did release in 2024, which is great. So let's get into it. Firstly, I had to kind of think about when this came out, and I was like, yes, this did come out this year. This is the Unearthly Cosmetics Spring Magic palette. Now, I actually picked up the entire Spring Magic collection from Unearthly, and Unearthly quickly became one of my favorite indie brands last year. And so I was very, very excited to just pick up this entire collection. And this is one of the best palettes of the year for me, for sure. I think that it's just very, very exciting. I love the color story. Whenever I saw that they were coming out with this palette, I was so excited. And it's very rare for me to be that excited about like an eyeshadow palette. And the fact that this one did that for me, I feel like says a lot. I was very, very excited to pick this one up. And I also love the versatility within this palette. I love that it definitely is very spring to me. This is definitely something where the blues and the corals, pinks, greens, all of these colors are really great for spring, but it also does kind of inspire me to come up with some different color stories or different looks. And I love the fact that you can create a variety of different looks with this palette. So, and of course, this is that really good Unearthly Cosmetics formula that I have come to really, really love and enjoy. But yeah, this one is definitely one of the top palettes that I tried this year. Then we have this next palette, and this palette is from a brand that I definitely fell in love with this year. I have spoken in great length about how much I love this formula and how much I really enjoy this brand. And y'all probably already know who it is, but it's Bella Beauty Bar, and the Poison Garden palette was such a beautiful palette to have launched this year. I love the color story, and I've talked about this before about how I love this color story. I love that it's very inspiring, and it really does kind of get my creative juices flowing, if you know what I mean. I'm able to just look at this and get quickly inspired on so many different directions that I can go with this palette. I loved using this during the spooky season, especially because I loved playing around with these kind of more grungy tones with the purples, as well as some of the blue as well. So this one was a top palette of me for sure this year, or of mine, I should say. And I'm so happy to have tried Bella Beauty Bar this year. I feel like they have quickly become one of my favorite brands, and they get me very, very excited to see what else they are coming out with over the years. So really, really love the Poison Garden palette from Bella Beauty Bar. It's definitely the palette that I would recommend most from them, in my opinion. Then we have the Neutrals palette from Cosmic Brushes. I want to say they're Cosmic Beauty now, but I still see them as Cosmic Brushes on Instagram, so I'm not sure. But this is the Neutrals palette. This is very, very beautiful. The moment I saw this, I knew that I wanted to have this one. I love that this is a neutral palette, but it is definitely what I would consider a neutral palette with a twist. I love that you can, again, create very unique looks with this one, with the greens. I also love that some of these shades have like shifts to them, which is really nice, because again, it's kind of a neutral palette, but it's a little bit more elevated, and I feel like that definitely reflects when it comes to the different looks that you can come up with on the eyes. So I really like this one. And Cosmic brushes I've really enjoyed. I actually tried them for the first time this year. I picked up the Muse palette from them and I really love it. That palette did not come out this year, or else I totally would have mentioned that one, but the neutrals palette did, and I was also very impressed with this formula and this color story, so I had to mention this one for sure. Another Bella Beauty Bar palette that I want to say maybe it didn't come out this year, but it was re-released, I believe, was the Strange and Unusual eyeshadow palette. And I love the packaging. I also love that this one re-released during this season, because Beetlejuice came out, and I felt like this was a perfect time to relaunch this palette. And this one was the very first palette that I tried from Bella Beauty Bar, and I'm really glad that it was, because this got me just really excited again for anything else that Bella Beauty Bar is going to release. I love the formula of their eyeshadows. I love that I can go in with these deeper mattes and that they are going to perform really well. I have had no trouble at all with Bella Beauty Bar's formula. Sometimes mattes can be very tricky with building them up into the crease, especially the deeper that they are, but I do not struggle with this formula at all. And the shimmer shades, of course, are super stunning. So this was definitely a top palette of mine this year, and I'm very happy to have it in my collection. Then we have some palettes from Natasha Denona. Natasha Denona definitely was releasing quite a few eyeshadow palettes this year. I think it's crazy the fact that I want to say launched like maybe 3 or 4 eyeshadow palettes this year. I remember whenever we used to get like 1 or 2 palettes from her a few years ago, and now we seriously get so many. She firstly, I want to say, came out with the golden palette. This is stunning. I am so glad to have this in my collection, especially in the Natasha Denona formula. This one I love because it's definitely giving like Urban Decay Naked Gold palette, and I love so much these tones with my brown eyes. I do think that they really complement brown eyes and darker, you know, haired features, for instance. And I feel like if you missed out on the Urban Decay Naked palette, this is a very close alternative, maybe even dupe for that palette, if you will. And I really enjoy these tones. Again, every time that I use this palette, I feel very confident. I feel very beautiful in these tones. And I'm just very impressed again with how these appear on the lids. I feel like, yes, you look at this and it's boring. It's definitely just a neutral palette. But because these are more golden tones, I feel like it's a little bit more elevated than just a neutral palette, if that makes sense. I feel like you can definitely still wear this for special occasions and day to day as well. So really happy with this one. I also love that it's not just golds. It's seriously some neutrals as well as golds. So you are getting a good mix in here, because if it was just a gold palette, like a bunch of golds, I don't know if I would have loved it. Like if every shade looked kind of like this one or even this one, I don't know if I would have loved it. So I like that she also incorporated some neutrals in this one as well, or just really pretty browns, you know what I mean? Like I love that. Another palette that Natasha Denona came out with this year was the I Need a Warm palette. Now, the I Need a Nude palette released last year, and that was very well received from her. However, I do feel like people were still wanting a warm toned palette from her. She listened and came out with a warm toned palette, and this one is still almost neutral in my opinion, but nonetheless, this is stunning. This actually, funny enough, reminds me of the Cosmic Brushes Neutrals palette. So if you're wanting a cheaper, quote unquote cheaper, because Cosmic Brushes, by the time you order the shipping, like it can become a little bit pricey, but it's still not going to be as expensive as a Natasha Denona palette, but they do remind me of each other. But I'm very happy with this palette. I love how it's just so appropriate for work. I always go in with something that's a little bit more like conservative and reserved for work, and a palette like this is perfect for that. I also do feel like I'm going to love this one in the summertime, leaning into the fall. I want to say this released right before the end of summer, if not at the beginning of fall. So I really am looking forward to using that during that time next year. And I do love that it's not overly warm toned like the bronze palette from her, for instance. I feel like this one is a little bit more everyday and a little bit more approachable than the bronze palette. A palette that released this summer, I believe, is from LA Girl. This is another top palette of mine, and I was blown away at the quality in this palette because this performs, it's almost as if like this is like duping like a Patrick Ta formula or something like that, because the shimmer shades in here are so special and so pretty. I love that they have a really nice, just kind of wet look to them. This shade especially is so stunning on the lids. Whenever I first used this palette, I was blown away. I was like, how is this LA Girl? Like, how is this so affordable? And this really is. It's so stunning, and it's so affordable. I think this palette was maybe $12, so this should be still available on Ulta's website, and I highly, highly recommend it. I do think that this is more than just a summer palette. I didn't even say what this was. I'm sorry. This is the LA Girl Eyeshadow Sunset Days, and the palette is named Under the Sun. So that is what this one looks like. They came out with this one as well as a neutral palette with some color, and by color I mean like they just threw in like a teal or something, but this one was definitely my favorite, and I love LA Girl's eyeshadow formula, so I was very happy to try this one out this year and was very pleased with the formula. Okay, then from Simply Posh Cosmetics, you guys know how much I enjoy Simply Posh's formula. I tried them for the first time last year. I used their Cozy Cabin palette that had released, and that's actually what is on my eyes today. My makeup has been on for like 3 hours maybe, so it's definitely been on for a little minute here, but I loved the look that I come up with today, and I love the looks that I come up with every time I use the Cozy Cabin palette from Simply Posh. But whenever they came out with the Coastal palette this year, I knew that I had to have it. I skipped the other launches of theirs. They had like the citrus punch palette, I think, as well as the Aurora Light. I skipped both of those because I wasn't feeling the color story, but this one I knew I would love. So I love the packaging. It's definitely giving summer vibes, and I love that. And then here's what the palette looks like. It is absolutely stunning. This shade is so pretty. I think I used one of these two shades, and I really, really loved the look. I loved how they looked on the lids. This is just so, so stunning. And it really does, I feel like, encompass like what the colors are when you go to the beach. I feel like some of these tones represent the sand. Of course, the blues represent the water. And then some of the other kind of greens kind of remind me a little bit of like what you find in the water, like seaweed and that kind of stuff. So I do feel like the color story overall really does represent like all of the colors that you see when you're at the beach. So this one I love, and I knew for sure that this was going to be one of the top palettes of the year. Okay, then we have the Too Faced Appley and Love palette. This was so exciting to me because everybody knows that Too Faced Tin Pan eyeshadow palettes are the best formulas from Too Faced, and it brings us back to the chocolate bar palettes, and for me specifically it brings me back to the times when they had those gingerbread palettes, and that is some of the best Too Faced formula in my opinion. And so whenever they came out with this one during the fall season, I knew that I wanted to pick this one up, and this one is so stunning. I've actually received compliments when I have used this palette, and I'm very happy to say that it was Too Faced, you know what I mean? Because I feel like this is kind of a brand that is a little bit overlooked nowadays. I feel like it's not as viral or popular, if you will, but this was a really high performing palette, and I loved that they went a little bit different than what they usually do when it comes to their palettes. I feel like this one wasn't just a neutral palette. You had your like greens and your reds in here. The reds performed really well as well, and I love a good kind of maroon kind of red look. Super, super pretty. It also smells like apple, like a cinnamon apple. It smells so good. So love the festiveness, the festivity of this, if you will. Love the packaging. Love that they came out with this palette in the tin pan packaging, and I'm really, really hoping that Too Faced continues to do that. So this was a top more so for the nostalgia, but also it did perform so well. So definitely a top palette of the year. And then this one for sure had to be in my top because I use this a lot actually. This is the the Urban Decay Moondust little quad that came out this year. And this is the Urban Decay Moondust Space Cowboy Quad. So this was a Sephora exclusive and I'm so pleased with this palette. I was contemplating whether or not I wanted to pick this one up, and I'm so glad that I decided to go ahead and go for it because this is stunning. I have reached for this so many times since I purchased it. I absolutely love the shade. Is it Sparkle Hour? Yes, the shade Sparkle Hour. This one right here is so stunning. It's easily my favorite shade in the palette, and I've just been really, really happy with this little quad. I love that it's only 4 shades. I love that they made it more compact. Last year's it's still 4 shades, but it was longer. So I feel like this one is more compact. It's easier to store and travel with and all of that. And I've really enjoyed just kind of putting it in it's the drawer that's next to my everyday makeup drawer because it's a quick reach and easy reach for me, especially whenever I'm getting ready for work and I just want to throw something on the eyes. I've definitely used this palette for that purpose. And then the last palette. So this was a total of 12 palettes. So I'm sorry that it wasn't 10 palettes like you were probably expecting, but I couldn't narrow it down. I really, really loved every single one of these palettes. And the 12th and final palette was this one from Lawless. This is the Dreamy Dozen Volume 2. I am kicking myself for not picking up the Volume 1, like the Dreamy Dozen palette that they came out with last year. I love that color story and I really wish I would have grabbed it. So I was not going to sleep on this one, the Volume 2, and I did pick this one up during the Sephora sale as well. And I am so impressed with this formula from Lawless. I really, really am. I have the baby one from Lawless and I think that one is really high performing. I thought the lavender one was not super high performing, but this one is. This one is so stunning. The shimmer shades are so buttery and soft and smooth. I love the way that they look on the eyes because yes, they're more of like the satin formula, but they still look so beautiful on the eyes. And then of course the mattes perform really well. So I feel like this is a beautiful, just staple neutral palette to have in your collection. And I'm really glad that I decided to pick this one up because I do feel like it's a really great formula. So those were the top 12 palettes that I tried this year or that released this year. Of course, I tried so many other palettes this year and I have still other palettes to try. For instance, I picked up the Nomad Polar Express palette. So I do need to try this one out. And then I also picked up from DD Signature the Fearless Holiday palette. So I'm definitely very excited to try this one out. This one just screams Christmas in my opinion. So I still have new palettes to try. So the ones that I mentioned in today's video were just the ones that I felt were the top palettes of the year for me. These were ones that I was just really inspired by. Oh, a palette that I forgot to mention. The last palette that I completely forgot to mention, I'm so sorry, is from Fantasy Cosmetica. This is the Harvest of Souls palette. This palette has the most beautiful color story, I'm telling you. And the moment I saw it, I knew that I had to have it. This is so stunning. I feel a little bit silly because I've only used this one once, and I'm sorry because that's probably cheating to some of you that it's included in my top palettes. But the time I used this palette, the formula was so good. The shimmer shade, I did go in with the shade Obsession, which is this beautiful green right here. And because I asked my husband, I was like, what look should I do? Should I do green? Should I do purples, blues? And he said to play with the greens, so I did. And it was stunning. The formula was so good. It held up really well throughout the night. So I knew for sure that this was going to be a great palette. So I apologize if that's cheating. I haven't had it very long, but this is such a good palette. And talking about, again, color stories that inspire me, this one surely does. So sorry I forgot to mention that one. But anyways, let me know, what are your top palettes that you tried this year? I would love to hear from you. You know for sure that I tried so many new brands to me, as well as new indie palettes. So I'm so excited for what 2025 has in store. However, I do want to, as we're going into the new year, just kind of take a pause, take a breather for a minute to really just play with what I picked up, right? Because there are so many great products that I picked up in the year of 2024. So I'm looking forward to just trying and test, continuing to test everything out and just really love what I picked up. So anyways, let me know again, what were your top palettes this year? And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Also, I would love for you to subscribe and be a part of my YouTube channel family here. Thank you so much for watching, and I will go ahead and see you in my next video. Bye.